Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another read along of To Benight and Beguile. Book 5, Chapter 9, The Kiss of Winter's Wind. From the outside, the red brick exterior of Churchill Green Asylum looked like a beautiful winter wonderland when contrasted with the bright white snow of that had fallen the night before to the early morning. The sun, as it shined its white light down to earth, felt a little brighter this day as Rebecca Lord scurried down the hallway to Dr. Nick Jordan's office. She was late to her appointment for good reason. All night she furiously discussed with Caspian, her son Jacob's overtaking the company she kept afloat for decades after her late husband Albert died. Jacob had successfully found a way to use Rebecca's mental breakdown and Evie's own misfortune to use in his favor to take over the family company legally, it seemed, but Rebecca was dead set on getting her rights back. She was in a feverish state, ready to jump back into the fray as the one and only Miss Lord, her daughter-in-law, Celeste, be damned. What stood in her way was the ability to actually leave the asylum after what she did to baby Gabriel and Evie herself. Over all their discussions, Caspian and Rebecca had come to a final and good understanding with each other. They had put their past behind them and decided that they would have to be there would have to be consequences for Jacob and Celeste. Uh, the, yeah, it ain't gonna be good for those two. And Rebecca was the only one who could hand them down. Another caveat would come later, but Rebecca first had to get out of Churchill Green. You're late, Dr. Jordan said, his youth showing on his perfect face. He lifted his brows, allowing his hazel eyes to shine in the afternoon light that seeped in from the shaded office window. Rebecca, dressed in a white dress with sleeves, then a triangle over the back of her hand, and gray shawl, did not sit after she entered, crossed her hands at her waist, sensing the Dowager Lord Matriarch had something to say. Nick asked her to sit so they could talk. I don't think this will take long, Doctor, because once I say my piece, you'll understand that it will be the best thing for all of us, Rebecca said. What's this about, Miss Lord? Sorry, Mrs. Lord. Dr. Jordan asked, resting a pencil between his fingers and lower lip. While I've been here in this place, I have had a lot of to think about, what has crossed my mind, and I've seen the ways that I have hurt others. But at the same time, things have been brought to my attention that I feel require me to return home at once. Nick shook his head as if he were shaking water out of his ear. That's impossible. The only way you can leave here is if I agree to it as your attending medical psychiatrist. We still have much on the judge's list to cover before I can do that. Mrs. Lord, you kidnapped and almost killed your own great grandchild because you were under mind control. I still don't see that you're able to break free from people who are inclined to use the same way in the future. I want to feel comfortable that when you finally do return home, that this list of requirements the judge was laid out for you is complete and that you're no longer a danger to Gabriel or Fabian or even Charlotte. That was the deal. Nicholas, you know as well as I do that locking me up here to face my fears with the very man that controlled my fears was a struggle, and I've survived and I've thrived. He and I are actually friendly now. I do not fear him. He has no will to control me either, Rebecca explained. I actually feel that after only a few weeks of being friendly with Caspian, you're ready to break back into the real world. Miss Sword, you're here, the two of you are here in a controlled environment where you have to literally see each other and deal with the horrors you both caused. It's too soon. It's just too soon. Nicholas, please, you have to. You have to let me go, Rebecca shouted as she stepped forward towards Nick's desk. Nick stood up, his white coat pressed from the long time seated at the table. It's impossible, he replied. Jacob has begun to do things against my wishes. You know what he's capable of. If I'm here any longer than I've already been, there is no way I can feel safe in my place back at Caramel when I arrive. I don't have much time, Nicholas. Please sign my release forms. I don't think you're listening, Nick replied, frustrated with the entire conversation. Gabriel is my nephew, and you could have killed him. I don't hear any remorse from you, not now or even in our many sessions since you've been here, which is, by the way, have been very few because you've refused to even acknowledge what you did. I have acknowledged my part in what happened to Gabriel many times. Do you really think when I look into my mirror that I don't see a woman that went mad at the top of a lighthouse every day, Nicholas, every single day that sits with me? I wonder what would have really happened had I not been stopped. Stopped Gabriel, but I stopped. Gabriel was saved, and thank God for it. But this involves him too. His future. Jacob wants to take everything, the entire business that my husband and his father created for their heirs, and Jacob wants the whole thing for himself. So far, he's succeeding. I received papers showing just that. How do you think Evie got here? She stands in his way. She always stood in his way, as did I, as did Gabriel, as did David. I was always able to somehow thwart more of his admissions, but with me here, Gabriel's future, the future he inherited through our dear Sebastian's parting, is at stake. Listen to me, Nicholas. Sign the forms and get me out. My return is the only way to stop Jacob. Nick scoffed. Listen to yourself. None of this sounds rational. How can I send you back to sort things out with Jacob if you're not thinking rationally? Because you have to. For your sister, I promise you, sign the papers, sign them today, and I will be sure to get Evie out of here. She won't be here more than 2 or 3 days more after I'm released. Trust me, when I say I can get her out, you know as well as I do that she doesn't belong here, Rebecca said. Nick paused. He was like a rabbit with a carrot dangling in front of him. He did know his sister was once wrongfully admitted into the asylum. He knew she was sane and that issues that surrounded her were more dreams that she could not control. But with his help outside of Churchill Green, he could fix her. She didn't need to be trapped like she was, and perhaps neither did Rebecca. Why would you help Evie? Nick asked, pushing the topic to see if he could detect any kind of deception from Rebecca. Because, Nicholas, because I know she's that not what they say she is, not on paper, not in real life. Her whole existence is a major threat to Jacob. Now Celeste too, her son extends that splits the inheritance once again to one more. Jacob is trying to make sure he gets the whole pie, and he doesn't deserve it. He deserves only his part. Send me home, and I get Evie out of, and she will be free of this place and Jacob's conniving. I promise you, Rebecca said. Nick mulled it over in his mind. He wanted his sister. He wanted his sister out. He knew he couldn't do it on his own, especially with Dr. Ward being the one who admitted her himself. But if Rebecca was sent home and was able to pull any levers she had with the right people she still had contact with, maybe then Evie would be free of this nightmarish world. She had been entered in again. That's all Nick wanted, his sister's freedom to return to her baby boy, who was now in Jacob Lord's greedy clutches. The danger was palpable. Nick lifted a bro and yanked open a drawer on his desk. After several seconds of tossing things around, he pulled out a form and sat back down and began to fill it out. He looked it over and over, and when he was happy with that what he had written on it, he signed it. It was Rebecca's discharge papers. If you betray me, Rebecca, you won't have to worry about Caspian or any kind of hell he brought on this earth, because I will make sure the hell I pass on you will be 1,000 times hotter than with Caspian Castledor could conjure. Evie is my best friend, my blood, my sister, and my hands are tied with her being here. I am trusting you. He handed the forms for Rebecca to read over. She quickly scanned and saw it was indeed what she wanted. She took a break and handed it back to Nick. Now, one for Caspian, she said, shocking him. What? Write one for Caspian, too, she repeated. No, this is about you and doing what you need to get what you want back of this Lord Empire of yours and getting my sister out to the way you say you can. Caspian has nothing to do with this, Nick said. Oh, but he has everything to do with this. He's the reason I'm here in the first place. And he's going to help me get my husband's company back, Rebecca explained. Caspian is. How? Dr. Jordan, leave all that to me and just get him out of here so that the two of us can go on our way and work at getting Evie out. You have my word that once I'm free and Jacob gets the shock of his life, Evie will be free too. It won't take more than a few days with my plan in action. This isn't what you said before. Had I known you wanted Caspian, the man who he's the man who did what he did to my mother and to you. My God, what he wanted to do to Gabriel, I can't. No, I can't do it, Nick said, showing signs he was about to rip Rebecca's discharge papers up. No, she yelled, extending her whole body over the table and grabbing his form. Let go. Let the papers go. You don't understand. Caspian is the key to all of this, and he's not who he once was. In fact, he's back to where he was before the devil took over. The exorcism worked. Doctors, he's his real self now, and he is going to help me. He is going to help Evie. I give you my word. Get us out of here, and I will get Evie out too. I'll bring things back to normal at Terramore. Trust me. I know what Jacob is doing. He thinks he's won, but I still have a trick up my sleeve. But not from in here. I cannot take back what is mine and give back what is Evie and Gabriel's from inside this asylum. Dr. Jordan, Caspian, and I have to get out again. I give you my word. Frozen in place, Nick paused and looked Rebecca dead in the eyes. She was serious. She was sure. She was in no way showing any signs of deception, and he could tell. He gave it a split-second thought and put papers down, grabbed another of the forms and filled it out for Caspian's release. I'm doing this for my sister, Nick said as he signed the second batch of forms while staring at Rebecca. Don't ever make me regret this. He handed both forms back to Rebecca so she could once again take a look at the and approve. She was still doing managerial work even while locked away at mental hospital. She could negotiate anything with anyone. That's why she was the best at her job. Contracts for anyone would always go the way Rebecca Lockwood Lord wanted, even ones with young doctors who controlled the fate of their patients' discharges. You never will, Rebecca said. The Lord family matriarch replaced the slipping gray shawl over her shoulder as Nick walked her out of his office and made his way down the hall to the nurse's station to file the release of Rebecca Caspian. As the two parted mid-hallway, Rebecca made her way back to her room. As she passed a small card room while several patients were sitting around playing card games, the tea from and sipping tea from the protective beakers. She looked over in the corner, and a nurse with one patient playing with a puzzle. She looked in the other direction and saw Evie staring out onto the white frozen grass of Churchill Green that faced the main hospital. "I'm going to get you out of here," Rebecca told Evie as she came up to her by the window. Evie turned and looked at Rebecca and didn't say a word. Her sea blue eyes were glazed over, her expression distant, but the life is still strong. She stared at Rebecca, and all the memories of everything that had happened over the past 2 years flooded her clouded, medicated mind, but she could not speak. She could not open her mouth. She just stared intently at her one time grandmother-in-law for what seemed like hours to Rebecca in silence. "Evangeline," Rebecca said, grabbing Evie by the shoulders, "do you hear me, my dear?" Uh, Evie, heavily medicated by orders of Dr. Ward, still said nothing in reply. Rebecca helped her over to an overstuffed chair and set her down. Evie's light blue and white striped hospital dress falling in a heap on the cushion. Rebecca pulled Evie's hair back and combed it with her fingers, then began to braid it. "You've been so wronged, my girl, and I'm sorry for my part in it. But I promise as soon as this is over, you'll be free to be home with your baby boy, and I'll ever hurt you again. Ever," Rebecca said. Evie suddenly lifted her hand and grabbed Rebecca's, stopping her from continuing the braid. Their eyes met, and there were no words exchanged, just the notion that eye contact and her medication that Evie understood. Rebecca smirked sadly. "It's a heartless world, I know it well. I've been in it myself," Rebecca continued. "You're only about 13 years younger than my Vivi would have been, even though I'm the age of your grandmother. I could have been your mother, maybe." Evie said nothing. "And yet I've been a part of doing such awful things to a girl the age of my own lost Vivian Victoria, my Vivi," Rebecca added. Feet from Rebecca and Evie's conversation was the open door of a card room. Caspian rolled himself in a wheelchair over to the door of the card room and watched as Rebecca, grandmother Evie, looking at the two without knowing the truth of their past made it look like a loving grandmother granddaughter connection. But there was always more than met the eye. He was still lovely, however. Caspian smiled as he heard Rebecca singing a sweet song in Evie's ear as she braided her hair. "It's almost over," Rebecca whispered as she looked up toward the door and saw Caspian sitting there. She smiled at him and whispered again to Evie, "Caspian, and I will make it so, I promise." As Rebecca stood with Evie and Caspian watched a nurse fiddled with another patient at the other end of the room. The patient, struggling to put a puzzle together, sat with the nurse who seemed uninterested in her duty at the moment. The nurse was much more fixated on what was happening on the other side of Rebecca, Evie, and Caspian. The nurse, with her intense, stern expression, stood up from her post with the patient and the puzzle and walked over to the window. She suddenly seemed nervous, concerned with something hidden behind her eyes. She was listening the whole time Rebecca speak with Evie. She listened and down, took down notes in her mind of it all. She was pressed for time. This nurse, she was counting the clock, it seemed, worried that the other shoe was about to drop in whatever was preoccupying her mind. At this nurse stood in the glow of the window of the card room, allowing the light filtering the glaze of her skin. The light, her reflection in the glass, something much more ominous. The reflection in the window glass showed a different face than what the nurse presented to the naked eye. In the glass, the face of Jacqueline Gray, who was masquerading and using her powers of shape shifting to confuse the world around her and walk around Churchill Green under a new face and free of being detected. She wanted to be close to her so-called new friend Evie. She wanted to watch her every move. Now Jacqueline worried that Rebecca, in her own twist to Jacqueline's own plans, to make sure Evie and Sebastian stayed apart for all time. Now the witch watched and secretly panicked that if Rebecca and Caspian were successful, Evie would be free from the asylum and free to rekindle her love with Sebastian, forcing Jacqueline to be alone again, alone and scorned. Now Jacqueline had to think quick and neutralize the thorn in her plan. Rebecca could before Rebecca could succeed in hers. Meanwhile, at the apartment over the constable's office, Aurora finished unpacking her belongings. Her mind was rife with emotions from the last few weeks. The loss of the child and gave birth to still looming over her like a ghost in the shadows. Her eldest child, Evie Jordan Lord, also now locked away in the asylum by the man she loved, Constable Gregory Rains. Because of the turmoil at Terramore with Evie's ousting, Nick and Aurora felt it better to make their homes elsewhere, away from the twisted world of the Lords. For now, Aurora would stay with Gregory and Nick would stay with Ashia, the two living with their very conspirators that took took Aurora's child away and adopting him out to Philip and Mary. After Aurora filled the dressers and closet with her things, she walked her back into the living room where Gregory was pinning his constable shield on his uniform jacket. Her mind to her from the mirror and smiled, a happy feeling flush on his face. To see the woman he loved making a nest of their own together. As soon as I can use an actual house, we'll be out of here this small place, he said to her of the small accommodations the county gave him. Without looking up from the fresh cup of tea, he just poured Uh, just poured, Aurora replied. It's fine, Gregory sensed chill from Aurora. Yeah, by the way, constables generally have to live where they're assigned, like counties and such. So, like, he can't, like the county and the state itself he affects. But he has to live in the county he's assigned to by whatever magistrate, etc., etc. Listen, angry with me about Evie, but I swear to you, if I could have stopped her arrest, I would have. But there were legal papers filed, and the judge signed off on them. The Lords have it down to the letter. I couldn't go against the judge's order, or not for anyone. Gregory explained. You're too close to the entire situation, Gregory. Rose said, snapping her body around to finally face him. Couldn't you have had a deputy take Evie instead? I mean, my God, I'll have that in my mind forever now, watching you cart off my own daughter into a paddy wagon. That's not exactly something I can let go of. This is my job, or anything this major from a judge should be me, not a deputy, no matter who is involved, he replied. Evie is not mad, insane, crazy. Do you understand me? She's not, Aurora shot back, her eyes filled with tears. I know that swear I do. What we have to do now is change focus. Evie is a strong young woman, just like her mother. We'll do what we can to reverse all of this, but I think we should both try to figure out how to get Gabriel away from Jacob and Celeste. How you said Lear's legal paperwork was ironclad. There was always loopholes. We just have to do our part to figure it out. Gregor added. Aurora sighed and sat up in the chair. She pulled a scarf out from the inside of her sleeve and looked down at the various silk patterns of light pink flowers that were all tangled in vines. She felt the soft silk in her hands and smiled. It was a Christmas gift from Evie 2 years before she moved from London to Welshport. It's pretty, Gregory said, rubbing Aurora's shoulders. She gave this to me and told me that the day she saw it in the shop, she thought of me and held on to it for months and months so that I could have something pretty to open on Christmas night. We opened our gifts on Christmas night, a little tradition to keep the kids from sneaking out before Santa arrived Christmas morning. It never worked. Aurora said they'd always find the real gift hidden in the house somewhere. Robert, my late husband, had lost so much, and we were already going through terrible times. And she saved and saved for the scarf and the two pairs of wool socks for her brother and father. She always been there to cheer us up, to hold us up into the light where we were so much darkness, and now here I am again in the dark, and I have no Evie to cheer me up. Aurora Gregory began before Aurora interrupted. No, I have to be here for her now. I have to find light for myself to get out of this dark wave of depression and get Evie out of hers. She's not mad. Nothing any good damn judge or will tell her that. No lie, Jacob or Celeste concocts nothing. She's my daughter, and I know her better than I know myself. She's not mad. The tears burst from sorrow-filled mother. She sobbed in a pink scarf, her long-lit brown hair covering her alabaster skin like a fresh peach of pink cheeks and lips. Gregory sat down and put Aurora into his arms and held her. As she cried, he rocked her into a deep sobbing until she tapped him on the shoulder, signaling she felt better. I'm going to help you, I swear it, Her said softly as he looked into her green eyes. I'm not letting her stay in there. Do you understand me? I lost one child. I'm not losing another, Aurora replied. Gregory sighed. His heart sank, think, thinking about the child he took from Aurora. Her child with Caspian, the child he said was a girl but was a boy. The child he said died but was living. The child Philip and Mary believed was an orphan and adopted and named Caleb. Gregory thought about how hated he would be if Aurora discovered the truth. He thought about how difficult their lives would have been too if the child would have stayed in their lives. A constant reminder of Aurora's time under mind control with Caspian took advantage of her to conceive the baby. A baby Aurora wasn't even sure she wanted. A child that Gregory saw as a dark force only because it was a reminder, a physical reminder of the man so dark and evil that could not bear to help raise its child, not even if it was half Aurora's. Lie, so complex and twisted, had remained intact. And so far, Gregory was pleased with Ashia's ability to have the child taken and adopted so quickly. Gregory felt safe with his lie, with his position, and Aurora's life. Aurora's eyes dried. Her heart was feeling stronger with the idea that she knew she could be a force of nature too, a force too. She had it in her to fight like hell to get Evie out from under the powers of the lords and their lawyers. She stood up and shifted through her handkerchief. Gregory grabbed Aurora's hand, so soft and delicate she was still wearing her wedding ring despite being a widow. He kissed her hand and then pulled her back into the bed. She stood in between his legs and smiled as she looked up at her from his seated position. Her long, flowing dark dress flopped over his knees like the leaves of a copper peach tree. She put her hands on his face and smiled and leaned down and kissed him deeply. She did love Gregory. He did love her. And for now, they were a team w- that would do all they could to free Evie and save her from the treachery that was keeping locked in the asylum again. But the clock was ticking on this secret in the form of a baby left to grow up on Good Island with his adopted parents, Philip and Mary. And one, maybe not any time soon, the clock would stop and the secret would explode. Damage was certainly on the horizon for Aurora and Gregory, far, far off, but coming, like the cold winds of the winter, biding their time to deliver their final frosty kiss in the late December's graying skies. At Terramore House in the study, Jacob puffed on a pipe as he read through the afternoon edition of the Welsh Report Globe. There was an ease to him as he sat in the yellow chair in the dimly lit drawing room. After everything that had happened, he seemed to not have a care in the world. Celeste walked in with the maid Jane, and the two boys, Fabian and Gabriel. Jane helped Celeste put the boys on the floor where they began to play together. Jane excused himself, curtsying as she quickly left the Lord alone to bask in the glow of their perfect plan of raising Gabriel as their own, thus controlling his entire future, free of Evie's potential involvement in the family fortune. He's gotten quite used to us already, hasn't he? Jacob said in a puff of smoke from his pipe about Gabriel's seemingly easygoing nature. So far, so good, but his hearing loss is something we need to discuss, Celeste answered from the floor, where she was sitting with the boys in her turquoise dress. I think the sooner we get someone here to help us with what he'll need, he'll need, the better. I want to make sure he grows up feeling the same as Fabian as best we can. Do you mean some kind of doctor? Jacob asked. Well, maybe someone who can help us learn ways to communicate with him. I don't know that there are specialists who teach ways to communicate using hand signals, and Dr. Ward said that Gabriel would regain some kind of hearing, even in a minimal capacity. Jacob nodded. Of course, anything, just say when and where, when, and we'll make it happen. Jacob Celeste said, leaving the boys to play some while she went over to the adjoining drawing room chair next to Jacob. She fanned away smoke and grabbed his hand. This was the right thing to do, right? I want to be sure. When I went to see Evie, she was so angry, and rightfully so. I can't imagine what it would be like if the tables were turned. Are you having doubts now? You shouldn't. Evie was and is a danger to herself and to this child. Yes, I admit when she moved here, I did some things to her to make it seem like she was not in her right mind, and it was my own attempt at saving myself, but now I think she really is unstable. I saw her with my own eyes on the ledge of her balcony. You heard with your own ears the story of her horrible dreams of a dead man, Matthew. She told Father Ryan right in front of you. Even Father Ryan was worried about her, Celeste. This was the right thing to do, Jacob explained. But to send her away, Celeste began to say, still with doubt in her voice, "Darling, listen to me. She's here on the island, not far off like before. Her brother is a doctor there. She's familiar with him, obviously. And of course, my mother is there. Perhaps they'll also learn to bury the hatchet and gain some focus together. A reunion, perhaps." Celeste cocked her head and rolled her eyes at Jacob. His attempt to gloss over what they did to Evie and to Rebecca was making her see he was doing his best to only erase all doubt in her mind, but also make it seem like what they did, the underhanded usurping of Rebecca and Evie, was good when deep down in the pit of her stomach she felt sick, feeling of guilt. "There's a bit of delusion in your whole speech here, Jacob, that I'm not going to get into. If it's all the same to you, I want to be sure that I keep tabs on Evie. I don't want her to feel abandoned. Even if she doesn't want to see me, I'm still going to be there for her every week. She was my best friend," Celeste said. "So it was you," the voice suddenly said from the entrance of the drawing room. Jacobs and Celeste turned to see Charlotte standing there, her hair tied up in a large blonde bun with two strands of hair on either side of her face, framing her eyes like a picture of an angel. "Charlotte, this is how we enter a room?" Jacob asked his daughter patronizingly. "There has been enough chatter and gossip in these halls of this house from the staff for me to write several books, but the things I've heard in the last week, I thought I'd never get confirmation on. How could you do that to grandmother and Evie? You two were responsible for their admittance into Churchill Green? On what grounds?" Jacob's eyes narrowed at his 13-year-old daughter suddenly bravely in confrontation. It wasn't like her, but he could see she had had enough. He stood up and walked over to her. She stepped as he approached. "Young lady, where is this coming from? I ask you again, is that the way you speak to your parents?" Celeste stood up, too uncomfortable with Charlotte's obvious acute accusation. Grandmother certainly needed help after what she did to Gabriel. "But Evie, too," Charlotte replied. "It's like the two of you found the opportunity to take control and ran with it. There must have been a better way, more kind ways to help both of them." "None of this is your concern," Jacob replied. "Why not? They're my family, too. Charlotte, both your grandmother and Evie were not well. We had to do what we had to do to protect not only their own lives, but in Evie's case, we had to also protect Gabriel," Celeste said. "Protect Gabriel and your bank accounts," Charlotte snapped. Jacob again narrowed his eyes. You're out of the line. This was for your good too." "My good? I don't want anything to do with this family's money. I never have. All the money and power this family controls only corrupts. Look at what you did to Celeste. She's not only concerned with what will happen to her if you get angry with her, but she's using her own for her own good too. Not Evie's, not Fabian's, not Gabriel's. Money and power only lead to greed and wanting more and more," Charlotte replied. "Fine, you don't want our family protection? You won't have it, Charlotte. There's your choice. That's your choice, and far be it from me or anyone else to force it on you to take it when you need it most. Tell me here and now, is that what you're saying? Are you saying you want nothing to do with this family? Can protect you?" Jacob asked. "Not if it means using it to hurt other people in this family. No, I don't want it. I want grandmother back home. I want Gabriel to be with Evie. I want a sense of normalcy. Charlotte, please, you don't understand," Charlotte said, stepping aside to get a better look at Charlotte so that the two eyes could meet. They had grown close since she became her stepmother, and since Fabian's birth They had become a family, albeit fractured with the lies and secrets that had been buried within their family walls over the years. But Charlotte, realizing the truth in the gossip she had heard, was now a step too far. I do not understand how you both can pay off judges and doctors and anyone who can thwart your threats by incarcerating our own family members in an asylum just because you fear they'll do something to make more money than your bottom line. I can tell you right now, if you didn't give a damn about Lord Publishing and grandmother, she ran the company better than anyone else in this house. Enough, Jacob said softly. You'll never be able to hold a candle to her, father. You know it as we all know. Enough, Jacob said again, a little louder. And when the cards fall, when they all fall down around you, no one will be able to help you, grandmother. Will be free at some point, I promise you that. And when she is, she will turn the tables on. Then what? You'll find another scheme, another trick? No, you won't. The clock will run out on you, father. And then the house of cards will collapse and bury you both, Charlotte added. Enough, Jacob said, shouting, grabbing Charlotte by the arm. Jacob stopped, Celeste yelped, jumping in at Jacob's hand off of Charlotte's arm. I had it in, I had it in my heart that you'd be more like me. I raised you. I gave you everything, Jacob said with a slow, cold turn in his voice. But despite all you've done, nothing but give me a heartache and a headaches. You're more like your mother than I ever wanted you to be. That is the real tragedy here. The mother you took from me, the mother that you spread lies about, that she would not be able to have anything to do with my upbringing. Yes, I know what you did. I know how you've controlled every second of my raising and how you lied about her and how you wanted me to believe those lies, but I don't. Not now, not anymore, not after what you've done to her and to grandmother and Evie. You are the treacherous one. You, father. It's always been you, Charlotte said strongly. All right, the both of you stop this, Charlotte Celeste demanded. You are family. We are family. We cannot come at each other this way. Charlotte scoffed. Are we family? Are we really? Celeste looked at her confused. Get out, Jacob told Celeste. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you or hear your voice. I need to go upstairs, Charlotte, and stay there until I come for your apology. Then come for it because you will not get it, Charlotte said, shocking both her parents and with her words. What has gotten into you? Celeste wondered. It's her mother. She's showing signs of her mother's contempt for proper norms. Mary's just as childish and pathetic, but she'll change her ways when she realizes she has no one else. No one else in this world, Jacob said, and she never will. Celeste was Charlotte was sick to her stomach. She had grown up in the shadows of her father's lies and treachery. She had seen everything he had done to many of her family members. She had known all the truths, everything, but she hadn't been able to do anything. Not for Sabrina's, not with Sabrina's help, not with her grandmother's help, not with her own new psychic ability showing her the right path in life, with revelations of the true nature of her father and family realities. It was cold. It was a cold, hard revelation that she had no choice but to reveal to herself. It was time to let her, time for her to grow up. I don't need you, Charlotte said. Jacob, who was walking back to his pipe, and turned to her and stared at her dad in the, her dead in the eyes with a cold look. He snarled at her and chuckled under his breath. Charlotte, stop, Celeste said. Charlotte looked at Celeste, a woman she loved so much even before she had become her stepmother, but did not recognize now as the same. Charlotte grabbed Celeste's hand and squeezed them tightly. You'll be next, Charlotte replied cryptically as she left the room. She's out of her mind, just like her mother and grandmother, Eliza. I never thought I'd see the day my own child would turn against me, Jacob said to Celeste now that they were alone. Can you blame her? We're breaking down her family right in front of her face. It's not something easy for a girl of that age to witness. Children like her, who have seen so much of their lives erode so quickly, need to feel secure. With things constantly changing around her, I'm not surprised she's rebelling. This seems more than a teenager rebellion. This is mutiny, Jacob said once again puffing a pipe. I'll go talk to her, Celeste said, turning to walk out of the drawing room, suddenly seeing herself in a large mirror on the wall with a golden frame made of gold flowers and leaves. Charlotte's words echoed in her mind. Celeste, too, was beginning not to recognize herself. Absolutely not. This is just a game of hers. Leave her. I refuse to play her game in cat and mouse so that she can feel more powerful. This is her way of getting attention now that she has two brothers. Celeste turned to Jacob, whose whole body was uneasy. She felt sick. She felt unlike herself. She loved Charlotte and only wanted to help her through all of her pain, but Celeste knew where her loyalties had to remain. It was to the man who sat in the plums of pipe smoking, reading his paper. She knew that Charlotte was right, but Celeste also knew it was too late for her to turn back now. Upstairs at Terramore, Charlotte tore into her bedroom, furious over the conversation with Jacob and Celeste. As she rushed down the hallway, she passed Jonathan Deviney, who saw how upset the young lady was. It puzzled him. As Charlotte angrily paced on her room, she realized what she had to do. She found a suitcase buried deep in her large closet beneath coats and dresses and behind several hat boxes stacked neatly on top of each other, began to pack it with as much clothes as she possibly could. Hearing the noise down the hall, her friend Morgan Thorne came running in. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes bright and haze toned. "Leaving," she said quickly. Jonathan then came from the other end of the hall and eavesdropped. Morgan grabbed Charlotte's hands and she furiously packed. "Why, what's happening?" he asked. "I can't stay here anymore. My father, he's just crossed the line that I don't know if he'll ever be able to cross back," she said. "Are you afraid of him?" Morgan wondered. "I'm not afraid of anything," Charlotte replied assertively. "I've seen enough to know real fear, and my father doesn't fit that. But I can't stay in this house any longer knowing he has no remorse." "Is that about Evie?" Charlotte wondered. "Where will you go?" Morgan said. "I don't know. To my mother, maybe. I was taken from her when I was just a baby and lied to about her all my life. I was told these terrible stories about what kind of unfit family my Spencer side was, and I was having to do with them, all of its lies. I'm old enough to know that it was just all garbage of it, all of it. Charlotte, how do you know your mother will want you back? I can't imagine she'd turn you away, but I don't know. I feel like you're not thinking cleverly," Morgan said. "What would you do then?" "Morgan, my mother has everything on of us on a target. He only thinks of money and power and things that can make him soar higher and higher, and he doesn't think of the consequences of what it'll do to anyone else. Not even his own children," Charlotte added. Jonathan, listening in the hall, took notes of this. "You don't think he'd hurt you, do you?" "You don't think he'd hurt you, do you?" Morgan wondered. "He locked me once in the turret room. He fears exposure. I am probably the one who can do that, expose his cruelty, so yes, I think he'd hurt me." "Well, yes, well then I'm going with you," Morgan said, finally releasing his hands from Charlotte, allowing her to pack again. What? Morgan reiterated. I'm going with you. I don't want to stay here in this place like this without you. You're my best friend. I guess I want to help you. What about your mother? What about Jonathan? He's supposed to be watching over you. If you leave, he's most certainly have issue with it. Jonathan waited for his ward's response. I don't know him very well, and he seems like a nice man, but at this point, he has a lot to deal with. He may not even miss me. As far as my mother, she's already abandoned me twice. I'm on my own, Morgan said, with tears in his eyes. That's right. You lived with your late father's mother in San Francisco at this time while your mother was here making a life for herself. I guess you and I really have a lot more in common than I realized. Both of your mothers were absent from our lives on different terms, but the same absent, Charlotte said, connecting the dots. Morgan sighed. My mother has a lot of her heart in her. She loves me, I know she does, but she only moved out here to make a better life for us. But it basically took my life for that to happen, and now she's off somewhere chasing the ghost of your Uncle David. I'm going to Good Island where my mother and her partner Philip live. I want to be with her. I want to be away from my father in this awful place once and for all, and I'm free of him. That is when I will deal with how I can finally expose him, Charlotte said, confessing her plan. But you can only do that if you are free from his watching eyes. I understand, Morgan said. I want to help you. Charlotte smiled slightly. She could see Morgan, who was only a few months older than she was really a good hearted boy, but she felt a camaraderie with him, and she truly did need a friend, no matter what. Despite her strange psychic abilities, that their core to her their core frightened Morgan. They were still the only they were still the only friends they had in the entire world. Then they'd become best friends. They'd become as close as two 13-year-old children could become. Pack lightly, she said. We don't have far to go, but it's still going to be a long journey, especially sneaking out. I will, Morgan said as he quickly left her room. Jonathan, still listening, hid himself behind a large potted palm in the hallway. With the exiting Morgan, the conversation he listened to was interesting and enlightening. Charlotte's idea that Jacob had a target on all the back of every single Lord family member made him think twice about trusting him now that he too was a part of the family business, and in turn made him think twice about trusting his own sister Celeste. This was truth in what Celeste said, after all, truth and percep- precedence. Jonathan, though, of David and Sabrina, Sebastian and Evie, thought of David and Sabrina, Sebastian and Evie, Rebecca and Gabriel, all of them, every single one of the members of the family. They had stakes in the family business, every single one of them agents of their own inheritance. If they were eliminated somehow, the funds, the trust, the money, the power would all seep closer and closer into Jacob's clutches. So far, the dastardly elder brother had succeeded in upserving everyone. But Jonathan, new to the rules of the Lord's family way, wasn't just another brother of Jacob for Jacob to steamroll or overtake. He was his own ruler and would do all he could to make sure Jacob was put on notice not to trifle with him. Jonathan knew the way to Jacob was through Celeste, but the worry in Jonathan's heart was that Celeste was too far gone. Back in her room, Charlotte snapped shut her suitcase. She moved over to a table where she had a few rings and necklaces that her grandmother had given her. She cupped the pieces of jewelry in her hands and put them to her chest and closed her eyes. She felt their power, power within them that was passed through generation to generation. In her mind, she could see a bright light bursting like a rising sun, and the light stood Eliza Good, her maternal grandmother. Eliza swallowed up in the light. Inside Charlotte's vision stepped forward and smiled at her granddaughter. The child was taken from Mary in a very, very young age. Eliza reached out to her ghostly and placed it on Charlotte's shining face and sang her a song. Inside you is a world of secrets. Inside you is a world of women. To our coven you belong, and your heart you will go. Do no wrong. Charlotte stood in her room with her eyes closed and tears squeezed through. She could feel her grandmother's power fill her body through the jewelry she was given. It was a powerful connection that she had always felt, but only had she had grown into her own powers did it all make sense. I will not let him win, she whispered to herself. Charlotte's voice said from her bedroom door. It was Morgan. Charlotte wiped her tears, turned to him. Are you ready? Morgan entered her room and saw she was crying. He followed his brow. His heart crumbled seeing her so hurt. What her father was doing. He reached over and hugged her tightly. She flinched at first, and tensed up, but then, like a wave of warm water, she felt calm and rested in his arms. It's going to be okay, Morgan said to her in a soft voice. We'll leave tonight together, and we'll never turn back. Charlotte squeezed Morgan in her arms. He squeezed back. She whispered him, Thank you, then closed her eyes, saw a vision of Eliza still in her mind. Then she said to Eliza, only in a way the ghost of her could hear, Thank you. Jacob perhaps had finally met his match, his own Charlotte, who was now old enough to take him on and make him pay for the terrible things he'd done over the years. She would stop at nothing until he finally met his consequences once and for all. Okay, guys, that's the read along. I'm curious as to what, again, seems like he's planning something. Curious as to what Jacqueline is just listening in. I mean, so she didn't hear nothing incriminating. So we'll see. A link to Benight and Beguile is going to be in the description box. Really, really good, guys. Go check it out if you haven't already. Book 5, Chapter 9, The Kiss of Winter's Wind. I'll see you guys.